A history-making approach to a mass shooting lays blame on both parents of the shooter. Is TikTok on borrowed time? And a very close call for a group of Americans led by Mitch Albom, their escape from Haiti. Today is Sunday, March 17, 2024, and this is Flashpoint. All right, let's start this morning with the second guilty verdict against the parents of the gunman in the Oxford High School shooting. Very happy to have Oakland County Prosecutor Karen McDonald joining us. Karen, I know you've had requests coming from all over the place. I really appreciate you being here. I'm also very mindful of your admonition Thursday night that there is no victory lap to be run here. But at the same time, I think you are hopeful that you have paved maybe a new road in America's mass shooting problem.
That's not what I started out to do. I think if the outcome of these prosecutions helps prevent gun violence, which is the #1 cause of death for children in this country, then I think everybody would say that's a positive outcome. I think there is a sense of relief, absolutely, for these victims. The parents, nothing can bring their kids back, but I think, when the criminal justice system works the way it should, it does provide some sense of relief and gives people some faith in what we're doing. So, it's not, I don't think anybody who was in that school that day or had children in that school that day woke up this morning joyful about it. But we all need to know that justice can be achieved, and it was.
So we had two different trials, two different defense teams, two different juries. One defendant testified, the other did not. Were you concerned about what differing verdicts might have symbolized in this case?
No, I was never concerned or really focused at all on what either case symbolized. I was just focused on what was the right thing to do. And I've always believed that the evidence was strong for an involuntary manslaughter case because it was absolutely gross negligence with this extreme set of facts.
And did it feel equal? Did you feel that the parents were equally culpable?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
I said from the start that I believe in our criminal justice system, and we don't just charge cases that we absolutely know we can win, if that's what you want to call it. And if the jury, either jury, had decided a different verdict, that doesn't mean the system failed. That's how it's supposed to work. But I was always very confident that if 12 reasonable people looked at what I saw at the start of this case and these egregious facts, starting with the post that was made by the shooter's mom, that very first day before we were even presented the case, it unfolded to me the same way it unfolded to everybody else in the state and the country. Yeah. And that was just a troubling post that led to a lot of questions. Yep,
sure did. We are headed, of course, towards sentencing. What do you, both parents have already been in jail for more than 2 years. What do you believe is the proper sentence here? Is it the maximum, which I believe is 15 years per count?
Sentences are determined by statutory guidelines, which includes a lot of different factors on how to score the guidelines. Candidly, Devin, I just haven't thought about that. And that is something that's coming up, but ultimately that's in the hands of the judge.
You haven't thought at all about what you'll recommend or hope for? I
have not.
Interesting.
That's just something prosecutors are pretty, most trial lawyers, but absolutely prosecutors we're very careful about focusing on the here and now. I never focus on or assume there's going to be a result when the jury comes in and they're about to announce a verdict. From the time you hear that they have one, it's about one of the most nerve-wracking experiences of your life if you try cases. And so I don't look too far ahead. We will clearly do our work and absolutely draft a sentencing memorandum. But ultimately, the voices that matter most are not mine or Mark Keese, who's my co-counsel. They are the voices of the victims, and they are going to speak.
Interesting now what's coming up. We've talked to not only the parents of those who were killed, but a lot of Oxford parents who don't believe that this is at all the finish of what needs to take place. You are kind of the keeper of state law in Oakland County. The way that most of us, the way we read this, you can't go sue a school district, a public school district. So I'm curious as to what you believe the likelihood is or the appropriateness of the suits that are going to go forward against the Oakland County High School and maybe some specific employees there.
I'm not a civil plaintiff's lawyer, and I'm not informed about the details of the civil lawsuits, and that was purposeful. My job as a prosecutor, our job as prosecutors, we do not want really to be interacting or working in conjunction with a civil suit, though it's absolutely their right to pursue one. But my statement and where I stand with the parents is about this accountability and transparency that's required. The guidepost report that was issued months ago was over 100 pages of a very thorough investigation, and it did reveal some troubling things. And these parents just want more transparency, and they want to know that these things are being addressed. And that's all part of what we're about to roll out with our commission, which I spoke to you about on the show, I believe, because we're very much focused on what happens before someone gets their hands on a gun. However, once that occurs, the standard protocol and evidence and data shows that what we really need is complete transparency. Yeah,
and we will keep our eye on that as well. I also know it's appreciated by many that you kept your focus very much on the victims and the victims' families. I don't believe we've uttered the name of the defendants here once in this conversation. Karen McDonald, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it. We'll talk to you again soon, I hope.
Thank you.
You bet. We'll take a quick break. Back with more. This is Flashpoint on Local 4. All right, welcome back. Let's follow up on the Crumbley verdict before we talk TikTok. I'm joined now by the former Speaker of the Michigan House, Tom Leonard, Deputy Editorial Page Editor of the Detroit News, Caitlin Buss is back with us, the host of Created Equal on WDET, formerly Detroit Today, is Stephen Henderson, and the Editorial Page Editor of the Detroit Free Press, Nancy Kaffer. Nancy, I want to start with you. Your column last week, pretty provocative. You were afraid that they would find the mom guilty and not the dad because I think, well, the way you kind of put it is that's how society is. Karen McDonald just made the point that she wasn't too worried about a split verdict that way, but I know you were.
So I got two basic types of reaction to that column. Mm-hmm. One from women saying, oh my God, totally. And one from men going, do you think, really? So, obviously Karen McDonald is a woman. We have, people go into the jury box with all of their assumptions and biases about the way the world works. Even when we're trying to be impartial, we can't divorce ourselves from some of these ingrained ideas. And we do have a culture that assigns more responsibility for children to women than to men. 2 million men didn't leave the workforce during the pandemic to care for their children, whereas 2 million women left the workforce to care for children. We have a custody system in divorce court that automatically assigns women custodial parent.
And yet, as I was reading it, I thought, well, wait a minute, though, these are two different juries, different defense, and different tactics. Absolutely. One testified, one didn't.
Yes, absolutely. But again, the biases that people walk around with tend to be pretty consistent. Now, I should say, I don't know if I'm glad to be wrong is the right phrase, because I'm not glad about any of this happening, but I am very satisfied to be wrong on this. I think it seems like a fair outcome to me.
Caitlin, as a mom, similar sort of, did you have a fear about that or not necessarily as you watched this play out?
I think once Jennifer was found guilty, I definitely thought James would likely be found guilty. I just think the tenor of this entire case And, it's not for me to judge whether that's a good outcome or not. I think the judicial system has a lot to absorb in how these cases have been tried. I think it can set a very interesting new precedent. I'm happy for the victims and their families. It seems like, this was a real culmination of what has been a horrible process for them. I think the big question is, Ethan was prosecuted as a full adult and he's serving a life sentence not as a juvenile, and now we have his parents also going. So,
was kind of a mixed approach.
There's some questions.
Yeah, I get that. Tom, does this have legs? Can it, or do you think there's too many things about this case that were just specific to this case? The parents buying the gun, on and on and on. Does this have the potential to be a different ingredient?
So the answer is yes and no. I mean, certainly this is a precedent-setting case. This is the first time we've seen this throughout the entire nation, a situation where parents were charged with involuntary manslaughter based on the shooting of their child.
Right.
But I think when you look at the facts of this, they were so extreme and they were so far. I mean, the idea that these parents were brought into the counselor's office, they saw that Ethan had written this note. He had severe mental health issues, and they didn't take him home. They walked out, particularly his father went back to doing his DoorDash or whatever he was doing, never went back home to see if that gun was still at his house. So I think the answer is yes and no, but the facts in this one were pretty extreme.
Stephen, now the likelihood of going after, in a civil way, the school district. Because none of these parents feel like this seems to be the finish.
Look, there's some liability everywhere here, right? The school district didn't do everything it could have done, I think, to intervene in this. I think it would be hard to prove. I mean, what you're trying to prove is culpability, right? Not just people who missed opportunities. And most of that culpability lies with the parents. I mean, this fretting about, well, will this set a dangerous precedent for parents? I don't think it does. Look, don't buy your kid. I
wondered if any single or couple of jurors might say that, but none of them did.
No.
Clearly.
I mean, number one, don't buy your kid a gun. How about that? And if you do, make sure it's handled safely. That is your responsibility. And if you're going to take your kid to the shooting range, don't be on camera doing it, because it'll show up in court. I mean, these are not hard questions, I think, as parents. The tougher questions were, how do you make sure that your kid's not having this kind of trouble? And then when you see it, what do you do to intervene?
Yep. Let's move to another really thorny issue right now for parents, Nancy. This TikTok debate in Washington has been fascinating. I'm wondering how much of this is about the specifics of TikTok and real worries about Chinese getting a hold of data and intelligence, all that sort of thing, and how much of this is being confused with just our worry about how healthy or unhealthy social media is for our kids. Those are two different things, really.
Well, I am an early adopter because I've banned TikTok in my house already. No.
You were Montana.
I don't think we can hand wave away the connection of TikTok to the Chinese government. We have the difference between Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, or X as we call it, is that they are owned by American corporations. The Chinese government is not necessarily a friend to American
interests. There's dozens of Chinese-headed owned companies operating in Michigan.
Not ones that you put that much personal information about yourself into, and not ones that influence so much of what we, plenty of adults are on TikTok, malleable children's minds, but also, adults are exposed to. My child said to me one day, he's not on TikTok, I don't even know how he got this, but he said, did you hear this thing that maybe the Titanic was an inside job? I said, no. And he said, I think it sounds fake, because he saw the movie and knows James Cameron told him the real truth. But yeah, this is the kind of thing that is very easily, very professionally, slickly, convincingly presented on the platform.
But again, that's about social media rather than about the business situation of TikTok.
And obviously, we have the right to say foolish things on platforms. Freedom of speech protects foolish speech, but we also have a government that has a responsibility of weighing when a hostile foreign government is involved. So,
Caitlin, your take on what we're watching?
I think the bill that passed out of the U.S. House, I think it's an important measure to at least show China, we're not going to take this lying down. And we are aware of, the manipulation you can do through this. We're aware of what it can do to the young people, or just everyone on TikTok, and not even just young people. So I think it's important we put out there, we're going to try and fight you on this. At the same time, I don't think if it were to pass, and it doesn't look like it would probably pass or even be taken up in the Senate, but if it were, effectively banning TikTok is really hard to do, not to mention the psychological emotions of a lot of people who there's businesses on there. I mean, there's entire industries on that platform now, so it's very complicated.
Well, of course, a lot of people believe that something will fill that space. If you take that one away, something
Sure,
similar.
I think the cultural problems, are going to be there no matter what.
No matter what. Tom, I'm still trying to figure out how much direct the tie is to Beijing in all this. The company is owned mostly, the majority of owners are international investors. Then a part of it is TikTok employees. And then you've got the guys who created TikTok, who are Chinese nationals.
And everything centers around, I had to look this up, okay? It's not necessarily TikTok, but this dance bite that holds all of this data. And the argument is at any point in time, the Chinese Communist government could ask for that data and that company have to turn that over. And there's no doubt that this is a national security issue. But I also question, what about the First Amendment implications here? Is this the least restrictive means to do this? Because there is no doubt, if this goes to the president's desk, and he's already said he's going to sign it, there will be legal challenges. And I question whether or not this can pass First Amendment scrutiny. I don't know that it can.
As Nancy says, you are free to say that Titanic was an inside job, I guess. Stephen, we cannot really get our hands around our relationship with China.
Right.
If I show up at any of our homes and start itemizing.
Most of the stuff in your house comes from them, and yet we are told that we should be fearing what they want to do. And I don't think that's a joke. I mean, there's no question the Chinese government has interest in our information and data and manipulating those things. I guess my question is, why stop with TikTok and a foreign interest in that? All of social media, all of these companies are collecting massive amounts of our data, and they are sharing it with we don't know who. What if they're sharing data with our health insurance companies, for instance, and they decide that based on our behavior on Facebook, we're more of a risk, and so your premium should be higher. I mean, there's all kinds of things that can result from this kind of data being everywhere. Congress is doing a really poor job, in my opinion, of dealing with that, and focusing on TikTok because it's Chinese is not a real solution.
It's interesting because this has been the most bipartisan thing that we've watched come out of the House in ages. Gangs, thanks so much for the conversation. Happy St. Patrick's Day. We come back, we will talk with Mitch Albom, making a narrow escape from Haiti. This is Flashpoint on Local 4. Welcome back. We have talked a number of times on this program with author and journalist Mitch Albom about Haiti and the orphanage that he runs there. It's often a troubled place, very fraught with problems, but it was a narrow escape for him and a number of volunteers who made the trip with him and his wife, Janine, this past week. But I'm very happy to say that Mitch Albom is back in the U.S., and great to have him here again today on Flashpoint. Mitch, you have seen so many problems before because you've been going to Haiti you've spent so much time there. You know this place inside and out. How shocked were you by the turn of events?
I can't say I was shocked. We've been following the violence of the gangs for many, many months now, or really ever since the president was assassinated 3 years ago now. But unfortunately, on this particular trip, as you know, I go monthly, so I'm kind of used to it. But on this trip my wife and I took 8 other people, volunteers, artists, child psychologists, and very quickly after we got there, the violence took a really sharp turn. They broke into the prisons and freed thousands of criminals, and then they closed the airports, they closed the ports, they closed the roads, the borders were closed. It became very apparent that we weren't going to be able to get out anytime soon, maybe not for weeks or even longer. And at that point, we had to start to try to turn our focus towards getting these volunteers who would come down with us back home safely.
Which is a huge responsibility, of course, that you were feeling. It's interesting. Gang violence has plagued Haiti for so long. In this case, what seemed to knock the Prime Minister, Ariel Henry, out of the leadership of the country is that the gangs all decided to get together and sort of coalesce around, I guess the country's now being run by a guy named Barbecue.
Well, the only thing worse than a bunch of gangs is when a bunch of gangs decide to work together.
Yeah.
And Ariel Henry, the prime minister, went to Africa to try to get finalized the deal to bring these Kenyan soldiers to come combat the gangs, and the gangs, realizing that their days were suddenly going to be numbered if they came in, quickly decided, well, let's just not let him back into the country, because if he doesn't come back into the country, he can't officially run it, and that army is not going to come here, which is why they took the airport, and they succeeded. They kept him out of the country, and he was in Puerto Rico all that time, and during the time that he was gone and nobody was in charge, they wreaked havoc all over the country, and they continue to do so, working together.
Mitch, I was embedded with a military unit in Haiti back during Operation Maintain Democracy in the 90s. The U.S. sent 25,000 troops into Haiti back then. You wonder how much stomach Americans have for another foreign entanglement, but also how much stomach Americans have for a nation that never quite seems to get its act together.
Well, I hear that, Devin, but I look at it a little bit differently. I look at the children that I work with, and they didn't ask to be born there.
Yep.
And these are some of the most brilliant, faithful, resilient children that you will ever see. And why should they live in a country where they have to hear gunfire every night when they're doing their nightly prayers, or they can't go out? They haven't left our orphanage in 3 years because it's not even safe to go outside the gates because you might get kidnapped or hit by a stray bullet. So I realize that people get tired of hearing this or that, or why help anybody else. But Haiti is not just any other country. Haiti is right off of our shores.
Yep.
It's an hour away from Miami. We occupied Haiti for 15 years in the early 1900s. We wrote their constitution. We had their money in our banks. We have a history there. We have an obligation to the region. And the fact is, if they sent 25,000 soldiers like they did the time that you're talking about, this thing would be over with in 2 weeks. I mean, these are gangs. They're not. This isn't an army. And if we sent that kind of force in there, they wouldn't be in there. It's not Afghanistan where you get entangled for years. They could stop this violence and open it up and try to let the Haitians have free elections and try to get something in charge. But 80% of the Haitians there are asking for outside interference. Sometimes when you're in a country where one group has guns and nobody else has a way to defend themselves, that group looks very, very powerful. But compared to a force that comes in that's a lot more powerful than them, they would be rid of very quickly.
We chronicled your harrowing escape, the helicopter ride, having to make an emergency landing in the Dominican Republic on our newscast this past week. As relieved as you all were to get out of there, I know it was with a heavy heart, because you had all of those kids that you care about and love so much, you and Janine both, are still there.
Well, that helicopter ride was a very bittersweet thing. It was the result of 4 previous efforts that didn't work, and finally that one did, and it was in the middle of the night, and it was right out of one of those movie scenes, where they're yelling, go, 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 and you run in and the blades are going overhead and everybody piled in on top of one another, and I think in 60 seconds it had come down and was already back up again. And as we flew over in the pitch of night, about 2:30 in the morning, we flew out of Haiti airspace, and the Corey Mills, who's a U.S. congressman who was in the helicopter with us, said, okay, we're safely out of Haitian airspace now. And everybody started clapping, except Janine and I were like, well, that means we're officially locked out of the country where our kids are. And the sad fact is that if that helicopter was big enough to take all 60 of our kids in it, they still wouldn't have been able to leave, because if they tried to land in the Dominican Republic, they would have been sent right back to Haiti.
Right.
There's no place that they can go. America doesn't welcome them. Nobody welcomes them. Their visas are not good almost anywhere in the world. And it's no way to treat an entire nation, especially children, tell them that, sorry, we can't help you. You're doomed to a life of violence and starvation and all the rest, and nobody else wants to help you.
Well, and I know you will be back there just as soon as you possibly can. They will all remain in our thoughts and hopes for the long term, that's for sure. Mitch, thanks so much for the time, and really glad you're back safe and sound.
I'm happy to be back and heartbroken at the same time.
Yeah, no
Appreciate
doubt.
it.
All right, Mitch. That's going to do it for us this morning. Thanks so much for being here. Have a very happy St. Patrick's Day.